Hi everyone, it's Katrina. The bronze hands. Thousands of years before today, the Greeks and Romans were doing something extremely strange. They walked the streets carrying bronze hands that were twisted and ugly as if they came from a corpse. Only these hands were crafted from bronze and were stuck onto the ends of wooden poles. Sometimes they were decorated with snakes, but other times the bronze hands had secret compartments where magical items could be stored. In every case, though, the bronze hands were carried around by worshippers of the extremely mysterious Zeus. This was a secret ancient cult that most people have never heard of. The bronze hand was known as the Hand of Zeus, a powerful symbol of a deity who's long been extinct. Zeus was a god of fertility, worshipped alongside the likes of Zeus and Dionysus. Although scientists know his name, they know very little about the cult or where it got its origins. All they know for sure is that the Romans were influenced by an outside source, with the cult migrating into Rome from somewhere else. The cult gained influence around the 1st century AD. It could have entered the Roman Empire through Thrace or Phrygia during the Roman conquest. It was likely an amalgamation of various religious ideas, maybe even with influences from Egypt. But like so many mystery cults of the Roman era, they didn't leave any written evidence behind. Scientists only learned about the cult when they started excavating the bizarre bronze hands from ancient sites in the Mediterranean. Then, in 1980, Professor Eugene Lane from the University of Missouri noticed representations of Zeus in ancient Rome. He was depicted with a crown, often surrounded by snakes, and was typically seen wielding a spear. But the only real feature always associated with the god and his cult were the weird bronze hands. And now for number 9. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Plant Lord and James Hyde. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. We'd love to have you. The Monolith of Talak. The Monolith of Talak is one of the biggest and most impressive sculptures that's ever been found in Mexico. It's a colossal piece of ancient stonework that depicts the Aztec rain god Tlaloc. You can find it today in Chapultepec Park in Mexico City, standing right at the edge of Reforma Boulevard, and the Colossus supposedly has supernatural powers. On the day the enormous deity was transported to Mexico City, a thunderstorm came out of nowhere. It was an unprecedented storm, covering the city in rain and igniting the skies with lightning for days. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe the Aztec storm god was making his presence known in the city. The Monolith of Talak was discovered in the late 1800s. It was uncovered near the small town of Coatlinchan. Villagers were digging an irrigation canal for their crops when they found it buried at the bottom of a dry stream bed. This resulted in a slew of archaeologists visiting the tiny town, and ultimately they concluded that it was Tlaloc, likely carved by the Aztec to try and convince the god to give them rain for their crops. During the Aztec Empire, people did whatever they could to appease the god of storms and rain. He was directly linked to the success of crops and was believed to withhold rain when he was upset. Whenever there was a bad harvest, the Aztec assumed they'd done something to anger the god. So, in response, they'd commit human sacrifices and build great monoliths in Tlaloc's image. The Astronaut of Cadiz. A great stone slab that was discovered near a cemetery in the village of Cadiz can be found in Spain, at the Cadiz Museum. The slab, also known as a stele, has been baffling researchers for years. The piece of rock is decorated with the carving of a bizarre humanoid figure. The figure has a misshapen head and rounded shoulders, looking a lot like an alien. It's been nicknamed the Astronaut of Cadiz, and the case is still unsolved. Many theorists believe the stone slab contains the image of an extraterrestrial. They think it was carved by an ancient culture in Iberia following an encounter with aliens. However, most archaeologists have a more grounded theory. They believe the Astronaut of Cadiz is nothing but a depiction of a Celt-Iberian warrior from the 2nd century BC. Latin letters that were found on the rock suggest that it was built around the time of the Roman conquest of Spain. But things aren't exactly what they seem. It's true that there is a Latin inscription on the rock, but the inscription is undeciphered. It was written in Latin script, yet it appears to be from an unknown language. Despite all the research that's already been done, scientists are still stumped. Does the astronaut represent a creature from outer space who spoke a mystery language? Or is the astronaut really a warrior, with the inscription being from an extinct proto-language that was once spoken in ancient Spain? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Arag Chalice. The Arag Chalice is a national treasure for the Irish people. The artifact was discovered in the town of Limerick in 1868. The chalice was part of a much larger treasure hoard that was uncovered within an ancient ring fort. Alongside the chalice were things like silver brooches and other precious metals. But out of all the objects that were found in the hoard, the Arag Chalice was the oldest. It dates to around 750 AD, suggesting that it may have been buried during a Viking raid. In the 8th century, Scandinavian raiders were a scourge in Ireland. The island was easy to pillage because the Vikings could easily anchor their ships and attack villages close to the shore. And due to its age, researchers think the chalice was buried to prevent the Viking raiders from discovering it. The entire hoard had been buried in a shallow hole, then covered by a slab of stone. The owner likely meant to come back for it later, but they didn't. So, if you put 2 and 2 together, whoever owned the chalice was likely slaughtered by the invading Vikings. The story of the Arag Chalice's discovery in the 19th century is extremely interesting. The treasures were uncovered by a couple of teenagers. They were digging for potatoes that they'd planted in the ruins of the ring fort, hoping that some ancient magic might protect their crops from the potato blight. Discovering the treasure was a big deal, and the teenagers hoped that they'd get rich. But as it turned out, the treasure was on church land. The bishop was kind enough to give the teens a few bucks for their trouble. Offerings to Zeus. Recent rainstorms in Greece have revealed a small but significant artifact. According to the Greek Culture Ministry, researchers accidentally discovered an offering to the greatest god of Olympus, Zeus himself. The remarkable find came when archaeologists were surveying the site where the ancient Olympic Games were held in the small town of Olympia. An intense rainstorm had washed away much of the surface sediment, allowing Zacharula Leventoris to see the artifact due to one of its horns sticking out from the dirt. The treasure is a tiny bronze bull figurine that was crafted 3,000 years ago, and it's only 2 inches long. The object was then taken to a lab where it was studied by scientists. Their preliminary results show that the bronze sculpture was made around 1050 BC. It was given as an offering to Zeus at his sanctuary, and it wouldn't have been the only offering either. There would have been thousands of these tiny votive offerings left at the Altis, Zeus's sacred grove in Olympia. The Rainbow Cup. Archaeologists in Germany just discovered a mysterious object that may have been created by a magical rainbow. Or at least that's what the legends say. Researchers found a rainbow cup coin that was minted by the Celts 2,000 years ago. According to the Bavarian State Archaeological Collection, it was found sitting next to a river. This ancient coin was just sitting there, waiting for somebody to pick it up. Researchers say it was minted around the 1st century BC, and on one side it was decorated with a 4-pointed star. Like other rainbow cup coins, this piece of currency is curved. It isn't flat like a normal coin. It's shaped more like a bowl. The name Rainbow Cup comes from the ancient Celtic legend of how the coins were supposedly made. It was believed that the coins came from drops of gold that dribbled off the end of a rainbow. Belief in treasure at the end of a rainbow wasn't only associated with leprechauns in ancient times. The Celts believed pure gold dripped from the end of magical atmospheric color arches. And that magical gold was then crafted into special coins to signify where it came from. This discovery is an enormous deal because as of right now, there are only 3 known rainbow cup coins with the 4-pointed star in existence. It's an extremely rare artifact, and it was minted right before the Roman conquest of Bavaria in 15 BC. After that, Roman coins became the standard currency. A little more serious and a little less magical. Ancient woven artifacts. In August 2023, an amazing discovery was made at an ancestral site on Kodiak Island in Alaska. The site was used by the Native American Alutiiq people for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. Scientists from the local Alutiiq Museum and Archaeological Repository were studying an ancestral sod house that had burned down in a fire. But beneath the ancient rubble were some pieces of charred weaving. Scientists think the woven artifacts were grass mats that adorned the floor of the dwelling 3,000 years ago. And they're saying the discovery is now the oldest known evidence of weaving in the Kodiak region. The Alutiiq are the indigenous people of the Kodiak archipelago. Starting roughly 7,500 years ago, they began to develop a successful maritime culture. They fished, hunted, and gathered, but their primary source of resources came from whaling and harvesting creatures like otters and seals. They may not have built great stone cities like in Europe and Mesopotamia, but they were still extremely advanced. The Alutiiq were skilled artisans who crafted kayaks and created intricate pieces of woodwork. They also made baskets and mats by weaving grass together. Weaving was an important part of their culture, but very few examples of it remain. The issue is that organic material decays so quickly that woven artifacts don't last very long. And that's why finding 3,000-year-old grass mats is a groundbreaking event for archaeologists. The last king of Babylon. Archaeologists have found what they think is a carving of the last king of Babylon. In northern Saudi Arabia, an inscription was identified on a block of stone. But it isn't the kind of artifact you can pick up and put in your pocket. It's an enormous boulder that somebody etched an image into during the 6th century BC. According to professionals with the Saudi Commission for Tourism and National Heritage, the inscription shows King Nabonidus. Nabonidus ruled Babylonia from 556 until 539 BC, and the end of his reign coincided with the end of Babylon as an empire. The kingdom fell to the mighty ruler Cyrus of Persia. It was the end of one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen, with Babylon stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean at its height. Nabonidus even managed to capture parts of Saudi Arabia before his final defeat. The carving of the ruler was found near Al-Hayt, which was called Fadak during ancient days. It's currently home to the ruins of a fortress and a treasure trove of rock art. The carving shows King Nabonidus and 4 extremely important symbols: the moon, the sun, a snake, and a flower. It's likely that each of these symbols represented a different deity. The moon would have represented the goddess Sin, and the sun represented the god Shamash. But the flower and snake are a little harder to pinpoint. Much about Nabonidus' demise is still unknown, but it's believed he was captured by Cyrus's generals and was sent into exile for the rest of his life. The Ox-Headed Bull. A guy with a metal detector found an amazing piece of Roman history in an unlikely place. The metal detectorist was wandering around the Welsh countryside when he came upon a stockpile of artifacts. The artifacts included some vessels from the Iron Age and some Roman coins. The big find, however, was totally unique. This guy uncovered a bull with a handle that was expertly crafted to look like an adorable cartoon ox. The makers wouldn't have known what a cartoon was, but they made the ox head on the handle weirdly cute, so it kind of resembles a cartoon character, likely by accident. According to the UK government, the find was made by John Matthews in a pasture in the county of Monmouthshire in southeast Wales. The trove contained artifacts as old as 750 BC and as new as 43 AD. Researchers think the trove may have been buried during the conquest of Wales at the hands of Roman Emperor Claudius in the 1st century. Locals may have gotten together and buried all their valuables in one plot to keep them from the Romans. Nobody knows what happened to them, but the villagers obviously never went back for their stuff. There could be a previously undiscovered settlement in the area, so researchers are now working hard to figure out what ancient town the adorable ox-headed bull came from. The Mystery Sculpture. Chan Chan was the capital city of the Chimu Kingdom. They emerged in Peru around the year 850 AD, and they quickly became one of the most powerful civilizations in South America. During their reign, they controlled 621 miles of the Peruvian coastline. Chan Chan was their greatest achievement, crowded with temples, shops, elite palaces, and water reservoirs. It's one of the biggest ancient sites on the continent, with a cultic group of sun worshippers at its center. After all, Chan Chan translates to mean sun. And it was in this city that archaeologists recently found a bizarre sculpture. The Peruvian Cultural Ministry announced the recovery of a wooden figure that's kind of creepy. Researchers were exploring the northern part of the main complex when they found the statue. The sculpture is just shy of 2 feet tall, with a flat face that was painted red. It was one of the earlier creations of the Chimu, making it around 1,470 years old. It's one of the oldest objects that have been found at the site. But what in the world is it? Archaeologists think the wooden sculpture depicts a ruler's litter bearer. But this leads to the next question. What is a litter bearer? People with this title were responsible for carrying the king's litter around. The king's litter was the earliest version of a carriage. The king would sit on a fluffy throne, which was attached to long posts. The posts were then carried by the king's litter bearers so that the mighty emperor wouldn't need to get his feet dirty.
Tomb of Human Sacrifice. Tomb Raider has come to life with the discovery of an ancient burial tomb. It's full of unbelievable treasure and something a little more sinister. Something suggesting human sacrifice. The tomb was discovered in Panama. You're always hearing about ancient tombs in Egypt and Mexico, but Panama rarely comes up. Now that's all starting to change. The tomb was uncovered in El Caño Archaeological Park, located about 100 miles from Panama City. The park is home to ruins from the Gran Cocle culture. If you've never heard of them before, don't worry, you're not alone. The ancient cultures of Central America are poorly understood. There are a lot of them, with hundreds of sites that have barely been touched by archaeologists. Experts have recently been trying to identify specific native cultures based on pottery style, but that's proven very difficult. The Gran Cocle were centered in the Panamanian province of Cocle, thriving between about 1200 BC to 1600 AD. For a unified culture, this is an incredible amount of time. They were around for longer than the Maya by a good margin, and for over 6 times as long as the Roman Empire. Just as a comparison, technically the Roman Empire was founded in 27 BC and fell in 476 AD. So the Roman Empire lasted about 450 years, while the Gran Cocle lasted 2,800 years. Think about that. The might and prestige of the Gran Cocle has been revealed time and time again. From the start of the early 20th century, there have been sporadic archaeological investigations. Every time archaeologists find a new city and start digging, they find something out of this world. One of the biggest sites is Sitio Conte, which was found in the 1920s and then immediately destroyed by an excavator. It was studied by Harvard archaeologists later, but the damage was done. El Caño was part city, part necropolis. Scientists call it a city of the dead. El Caño was used as a burial compound complete with cemeteries, tombs, monoliths, ceremonial zones, and housing units. It was used up until 1,000 years ago, when suddenly it was abandoned. The recently discovered tomb was built in 750 AD for an unknown king, a great ruler of the jungle. Oh, and remember when I mentioned something sinister that suggested human sacrifice? The newly discovered king wasn't alone. There were dozens of bodies buried alongside the mysterious leader. The exact number is unknown as excavations continue, but it could be as many as 32. Archaeologists believe the remains to be victims of sacrifice, meant to escort the king into the afterlife. According to the director of excavations, Dr. Julia Mayo, this king was buried in a highly unusual position. Although I guess it could depend on your idea of what's unusual. His body was placed upside down on the body of a woman. The corpses were face to face, almost as if they were carefully placed in an eternal kiss. Dr. Mayo said they were buried like this so that the king had a companion on his journey to the afterlife. Lovely. The king didn't want to be lonely in death. Apparently, the dozens of sacrificed people around him weren't enough. He also needed someone right underneath him. Who was this guy? I did promise treasure, so here it is. Archaeologists found earrings decorated with whale teeth, bracelets, crocodile earrings, a skirt made from dog teeth, bone flutes, belts fashioned from gold, and a full golden shawl that was used to wrap the king's body. I will leave you with one additional piece of information. Archaeologists have found evidence that the Gran Cocle traded with the Maya. There may have been a sort of Mesoamerican Silk Road from Panama to Mexico, and it probably went even further. The toilet spoon. The toilet spoon doesn't sound like something you'd want to find next to the soup spoon or the salad fork at a fancy dinner. What even is that? It sounds made up, but a toilet spoon is a very real artifact that was recently discovered in Wales. And you're not going to believe what the ancient Roman spoon was used for. It was 2020, and amateur metal detectorist Valentinas Adejevas was exploring the Vale of Glamorgan. It sounds like a misty region from a fantasy book populated by spiky mountains and trolls. It's located in Wales, which is about as close to an Arthurian backdrop as you can get. The metal detectorist found a single utensil, a small silver spoon known as a Roman ligula. It's not the most decorative spoon. It's a small circular bowl attached to a bent handle made from silver. Valentinas gave the object to the Portable Antiquities Scheme for Wales, who transferred it to the local museum. But what was it used for? Experts at the museum think that because the utensil was made from silver instead of a cheaper copper alloy, it was likely used in medical procedures. The toilet spoon, as it's commonly known, was often used for cosmetics. Somebody could scoop out their makeup using the toilet spoon. It probably should be called la toilette spoon or the cosmetic spoon, which might be more appropriate. But fancier ones were used to extract tinctures during medical procedures. Even the ancient Romans understood that silver has antimicrobial properties. Romans weren't the only ones to have toilet spoons. Other ivory examples have been found, and some that were intricately carved to resemble various creatures, like a falcon from ancient Egypt. The goddess. A pair of new and very exciting artifacts have been found in Petra in Jordan. Petra is the ancient city of the Nabateans. Archaeologists describe the new relics as absolutely exquisite, so you know they must be good. These incredible artifacts were discovered by scientists from North Carolina. They were excavating lost structures along the North Ridge, looking for objects that belong to everyday folks. The researchers from North Carolina State University wanted to learn more about the people of Petra, those who swept the floors and prepared the meals and built the houses, not the elite. Their investigation was a huge success. They uncovered two mysterious statues that speak volumes about what life was like for regular people in Petra. The statues are dated to 106 AD, fashioned in the Roman style. The statues represent beautiful goddesses. The Nabateans were the ones who built Petra and other magnificent cities across Jordan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Did you know that Petra is one of only 2,000 sites linked to the Nabatean civilization? As for where they came from, it all started 2,500 years ago. The Nabateans were a nomadic tribe that wandered aimlessly across the desert. Maybe not aimless, but they did certainly do a lot of wandering, as nomads do. They may have even been wandering in the desert for thousands of years earlier than scientists even realize. Then something changed. The Nabateans stopped their vagabond ways and settled down. They built some of the first great settlements in the region. These settlements really took off in the 1st century BC, becoming hubs of trade and commerce. The Nabateans were making headway in the worlds of astronomy, agriculture, politics, and art. They were on their way to becoming one of the most sophisticated cultures of the ancient world. Then came the Romans. Dun dun dun! The big bad Romans came marching across the desert and seized the city of Petra. They took over all of Nabatea, hijacked their trading routes, and destroyed Nabatean culture. Their traditions and history were lost. As you can imagine, finding anything from the Nabateans is a huge deal for archaeologists. When researchers found the two statues of the goddess buried next to an ancient staircase, they were thrilled. It's what the goddess statues represent that is so exciting. The statues were built after the Romans took over Petra. They were also found inside what experts believe was a local person's home. The statues show that even after they were conquered, the Nabateans adjusted to their new society under Roman leadership. They essentially adopted Roman gods and goddesses to survive. Remains of the Beheaded. A ghoulish discovery was made in a Parisian chapel. The discovery involves around 500 beheaded nobles, the ancient equivalent of beheaded billionaires. For the last century or so, historians believe the remains of 500 people who met their fate at the bottom of the guillotine were buried in the Paris catacombs. These 500 people were executed during the French Revolution. Among them was Maximilien Robespierre, who kicked off the Reign of Terror himself. New research has shown that these corpses may have been buried somewhere outside the catacombs. In 2018, the administrator of Chapelle Expiatoire noticed something a little strange about the walls in the lower chapel. The columns looked a little uneven, as if there were spaces between them where there shouldn't have been spaces. The administrator was so concerned about the columns that he reached out to archaeologist Philippe Charlier, who arrived on site with a tiny camera. It was a spy camera, or the kind you could stick up your nose to look at your brain or slip under someone's door to peep on them. Not that you would ever do such a thing. Philippe inserted the tiny camera through the stones in the wall and found something incredible. There are a few things that I want to explain before I continue, so just bear with me. Between 1793 and 1794, an obscene number of aristocrats were publicly beheaded in the Place de la Révolution, now called the Place de la Concorde. It was, and still is, a large public square. During the French Revolution, angry Parisians gathered here to watch the rich nobility have their heads lopped off. The massacre was part of the time called the Reign of Terror. Chapelle Expiatoire is a chapel from the early 19th century. How's my French? It was designed years after the Reign of Terror ended. Nobody had realized that inside its walls were hollow spots containing large chests. When Philippe stuck his spy camera through the walls, he found 4 massive boxes full of bones. After the Reign of Terror, the Madeleine Cemetery was one of the official burial sites for the guillotine victims. In 1814, King Louis XVIII ordered the remains of his dead brother, Louis XVI, and his dead sister-in-law, Marie Antoinette, to be removed from the cemetery. Once their bodies were removed, he ordered that Chapelle Expiatoire be constructed on top of the burial site as a memorial to the beheaded couple. It was assumed the rest of the bones at the cemetery were moved to the Paris catacombs. But many of them were apparently put into chests and then built into the walls themselves. How creepy is that? And now for number 10. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Rebs and Blue and Hugh Bean for supporting this channel. I hope you have a wonderful day, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about mysterious recent discoveries. Mi'kmaq petroglyphs. On the eastern coast of Canada, at the edge of Nova Scotia, is the only national park in the country that is fully protected as a National Historic Site. The trees and water and animals are all protected, and so are these incredible petroglyphs. The park is called Kejimakujik, a protected Mi'kmaq cultural landscape. There is a trail within the park that leads to a series of petroglyphs that are not like petroglyphs you're used to seeing. The first thing you need to know is that they are almost gone. Scientists think that in 30 years, the wind and rain and floods will destroy the images forever. And although scientists have tried to put measures in place to protect them, the Mi'kmaq Council wants them left alone. The Native Americans believe that everything has a soul, including stone. Rather than protecting the images forever, they believe their lives must end just like all living things. The Mi'kmaq say that when the petroglyphs were carved, it was understood that they would only have a small lifespan. They weren't meant to be there forever. You can see the images here, carvings of what appear to be men and women, pieces of clothing, and canoes. There are over 500 in total. If you look closely, you can see that some of them are dated. Some even have the signatures of the original artists. That's a little odd, right? Usually archaeologists have a nightmare of a time dating petroglyphs. These artifacts are notoriously hard to place, but in Nova Scotia, the native people were nice enough to date and sign their works of art. Not many people outside of Canada have heard of the Mi'kmaq. For the Americans watching, they have the same sort of notoriety in Canada as the Apache of the Southwest. Their culture was primarily oral, with very little in the way of the written word. Because of this, there aren't documents to detail the traditions and history of the Mi'kmaq. There aren't even many old petroglyphs. The ones in Kędzierzyn were made as recently as the 19th and 20th centuries. A surprise in Poland. Two very unlikely statues were found on the grounds of a palace in Poland. These statues were ancient. One was of the Egyptian god Osiris, and the other of the Roman god Bacchus. The unlikely figures are so out of place that there were doubts raised as to their authenticity, but they are real, confirmed authentic artifacts by the National Museum in Lublin, near where they were found. Scientists at the University of Warsaw said the figures are original objects from ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. But how did the figures get to Poland? And why were they lost on the grounds of an epic palace complex? The tiny figurine of Osiris was made in the 1st millennium BC, while the bust of Bacchus was made in the 1st century AD. The explanation is that the artifacts were part of a wealthy family's collection, up until it was stolen by the Nazis. The Klanowski family lived in the Kluszkowice Palace. Maria Klanowski spent 4 months in Cairo in 1904, which she detailed in her memoirs. That was most likely where the Osiris figure came from. The bronze bust of Bacchus, Roman god of wine and agriculture, likely came into the family's possession around 1906. It was pillaged from a tomb by the family's chaplain, Antoni Chotnicki, that same year. They were getting artifacts from all over the place, apparently. Then, 1942 came along. Nazis confiscated all the treasure from the palace and forced the Klanowski family to flee. They left with nothing but their personal belongings. It was part of the horror endured by the Polish people during World War II. These particular artifacts were likely buried near the castle by one of the family members who fled. Maybe they were hoping to get them when they got back. The rest of the treasure in the collection was stolen by the Nazis. Amazing coins. Coins have a really weird value that isn't always easy to guess. If you watched the recent video I did about the lava treasure saga and the hundreds of coins worth $250,000 each, you might think that all ancient coins are worth a fortune, but they're not. You can buy Roman coins online for a few bucks a pop. But what about a hoard of 122 Anglo-Saxon pennies that were discovered buried in Essex? How much do you think 100 pennies that were buried in 1066 AD could be worth? I know exactly how much these coins are worth because they were recently sold at an auction in London. The coins were expected to earn roughly $400,000. Instead, they ended up raking in way more. The treasure was sold for a little over $500,000. Even coin expert Nigel Mills from the auction house said the price exceeded all expectations. What made these coins so valuable? To understand, I should tell you how they were discovered in the first place. It happened in 2019. A pair of metal detectors found 144 coins buried in a random piece of land. They were brought to Cambridge's Fitzwilliam Museum to be investigated. Experts dated the coins to 1066, as I said already. But what I forgot to say is that 1066 was the year that the English army battled against the invading Normans for supremacy of the realm. It's believed the coins were buried underground by someone who had to go off to war. This soldier was most likely hoping to go back home and dig them up, but fell on the battlefield. In case you're curious, the Normans won. King Edward the Confessor died on January 5th of 1066, with subsequent events leading to the Battle of Hastings on October 14th. The Norman army, led by Duke William of Normandy, smashed King Harold's English army, changing the course of England's history forever. Mysterious fruit. Everybody knows that when Jesus was born, he was visited by the 3 wise men. And what did they bring him? That's right, frankincense and myrrh. I think some gold too, but definitely frankincense and myrrh. So, can you tell me what those 2 things are? Frankincense and myrrh are both saps taken from trees, not much different from maple syrup. Only they were burned as incense in ancient times, added to perfumes, and mixed in the medicines. They were most popular as incense because of the intense fragrance they give off. When Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, the resins, again basically tree sap, would have been very valuable gifts. They must have been if the wise men gave them to Jesus. Something bizarre was discovered on the outskirts of a small Indian village in the 1970s. Paleontologists uncovered some very small fossils embedded in gray rock. They were clearly plant fossils, maybe from an extinct species of fruit. But scientists in India couldn't figure out what the fossils were, so they ended up in storage, where they stayed until now. Recently, scientists were able to identify the fossils. These tiny artifacts, looking like nothing more than small pebbles, are the oldest examples of frankincense and myrrh ever discovered. Scientists figured this out by using CT scanning technology. One of the men behind the project was Stephen Manchester at the Florida Museum of Natural History. The CT images revealed that what were previously believed to be fruit seeds were in fact pyrenees. What in the world is a pyrenees? It's a type of dispersal pod that gives seeds a hard layer of protection like an armored shell. Think of the shells around cherry seeds or peach seeds. Or an even better example is a pistachio shell, the most stubborn shell known to humanity. Unlike normal seeds, only a few plant groups produce pyrenees, and even fewer produce pyrenees that look like the ones found in India, with their 5 seeds arranged in a pentagram of all things. By process of elimination, Stephen and his team traced the small fossils to an extinct species in the frankincense family called Berseraceae. These tiny artifacts tell a big story. They are also significantly older than you might be thinking. The seed pods are at least 50 million years old, dating to a time when India was an island off the southeast coast of Africa. The Jade Mask. Take a look deep into the eyes of this creepy jade mask and tell me your spine doesn't tingle at least a little bit. Archaeologists found this amazing mask while recently excavating an ancient Mayan city in Guatemala. It was hidden in a pyramid tomb. The mask is phenomenal, made of interlocking pieces of jade that fit together like a 3-dimensional puzzle. Some of the pieces are carved with hieroglyphics. Some are incredibly thick. All of them are hugely valuable. According to the University of Alabama, whose scientists were behind the discovery, the mask was most likely part of a royal burial at the site of Xochitlam. When they were first found, scientists didn't know what the pieces were. All they had was a pile of jade fragments. It wasn't until they got back to their laboratory to do field analysis that they realized the pieces clicked together. How cool it must have been to be in the lab when the final piece of the mask was put into place. You half expect an ancient Mayan spirit to rise from the mask and curse everyone in the room. But who did the mask belong to? And where is Xochitlam anyway? It isn't a city that most people have heard of before. Xochitlam is in the Maya lowlands, deep in the jungles of Guatemala, where it's believed the Maya civilization first came into being. The Maya are most often associated with Mexico, and that is where many of their greatest cities were. But their heartland was Guatemala, and specifically the lowlands. The Maya flourished here in a big way between 200 and 900 AD. The city itself is very impressive. It has everything you would expect in an ancient Mayan metropolis. Huge pyramids, great structures, and mysterious burials. The mask was found in a tomb underneath a nameless pyramid. The tomb likely belonged to a king, though his name is unknown. Experts believe the mask was meant to be a representation of a storm god, most likely Chak, Mayan god of rain, lightning, and thunder. But why the king was buried with the face of a god is, like everything else at Xochitlam, unknown. Metal armor. You always see knights in shining armor on TV, parading through medieval castles and jousting in tournaments, but you never see them in America, and definitely not in Maryland in the 1600s. But that's all changing. Archaeologists found proof of a knight in shining armor from colonial America. Researchers at the historical fortress of St. Mary's City dug up a suit of metal armor from the early 17th century. Not a full suit of armor with gauntlets, helmets, and all the other pieces. They only dug up a tasset, which was the metal piece that protected the knight's thighs. Still, it would have been part of a full set. St. Mary's City is a historic fort that nobody even knew existed until 2021. That was when archaeologists discovered the outline of the colonial fort. Over the last couple of years, scientists have been continuously excavating the site. Researchers are thinking it could be one of the most important places in American history. St. Mary's City appears to have been built in 1634. The people who founded the fort were some of the first European settlers to arrive in Maryland. The ruins are just to the south of the modern St. Mary's City, which of course was the first colonial capital. Archaeologists have already found some weird stuff, like the skeleton of a teenager and a random pair of scissors. It was in late 2023 that they pulled out a piece of dirty metal from an old cellar that had been transformed into a trash pit. The piece of metal was from a suit of armor. For those who have never been to Maryland, you should know that it can be a very hot and humid environment. For European settlers, they wanted to keep their metal armor on, but likely found it too uncomfortable. They would have discarded unnecessary pieces, but kept certain pieces for protection, like the tasset. This isn't the first time that knightly armor has been found in America. Breastplates and helmets have been recovered from the ruins of Jamestown, Virginia. Jamestown was also one of the very first colonial settlements in the country. There is still a lot of work to do at St. Mary's City. Researchers are currently working on uncovering the remains of a humongous building. They've only found its outline, so they don't know what it was. Maybe a public house, maybe a church, or perhaps a military structure. The whole place is a mystery because there is almost no information about it. The records show that 2 ships, the Ark and the Dove, brought settlers from Britain to the colonies in 1634. But after 1642, St. Mary's City doesn't appear in any records. The One Ring. In Denmark, a man with a metal detector has discovered a ring. Is it the one ring to rule them all? Probably not, but it's seriously ancient. The ring is made from gold and dates to about 1500 years ago. It also might be connected to a mysterious family that ruled France after the fall of Rome. The man behind this incredible discovery is Lars Nielsen, a guy who likes hunting for treasure. Who doesn't wish they could go on weekend treasure hunts and actually find gold and jewelry? Lars was exploring southern Jutland when he found the ring from the 5th century AD. In a statement, Lars said it was completely surreal. He couldn't believe his luck. Now let's forget about Lars. Sorry, Lars, we're here for the treasure, and focus on the mysterious ring. The ring was presented to scientists at the National Museum of Denmark, who quickly determined it belonged to somebody royal. Somebody like a princess or a prince's daughter, since it's a traditional woman's ring. Because the ring is made from gold, it was most likely a diplomatic gift. Based on the exquisite craftsmanship, the distinct spiral pattern and trefoil knobs, it's believed it was made in the Frankish kingdom. There are a few clues here that add up to one big conclusion. Made by the Franks, given as a diplomatic gift, worn by a woman. It's likely the ring was given as a present to a woman from Denmark who married somebody royal from the Merovingian dynasty. This woman's marriage may have connected the Norsemen and the Merovingians, who had taken over France after the Roman Empire disintegrated. It's all just speculation for now. Curator of the museum, Kirstine Pommergaard, believes there was a royal family that controlled a large area of southwest Jutland. They must have joined forces with the Merovingians through marriage to secure a trading network. However, there isn't a single record of this family anywhere. The ring also has a red stone in its center, which was often a symbol of power for the Norse people. The Ancient Factory. In Pakistan, archaeologists have discovered an ancient factory. Now, what do you think this factory produced? Ancient weapons of war? Wheels for chariots? I almost guarantee you're not going to guess this one correctly. That's how random the discovery is. Archaeologists from Pakistan and Italy were involved in the research. They were excavating the ancient city of Banbor when they came across fragments of elephant ivory. Banbor, about 40 miles from Karachi, was once a hugely important city. It was the gateway to India through which the Arab invaders passed over 1,000 years ago on their way to conquer South Asia. You wouldn't know it today because the whole city is ruined, but Banbor was once on the forefront of industry. It emerged in the 1st century BC and transformed into an industrial powerhouse. It's nothing but dirt and ash and dust and stone now, with walls hardly taller than your knee. But it used to have grand factories. One of the factories was used for processing ivory. The director of the site said researchers found 6,675 ivories, the biggest number ever recorded at an ancient site. Nowhere else on the planet have so many pieces of ivory been found. It's as if every piece of ivory from the ancient world was transported to Banbor, where it was processed in this factory. What exactly did the factory do with the ivory? That's a question that I don't have an answer to. Perhaps it was all turned into jewelry. All archaeologists know for sure is that an industrial building existed here to process tens of thousands of ivory pieces at least 1,400 years ago. Even without the ivory artifacts, Bangor has an incredible history. I said earlier that it was used as a gateway to conquer South Asia, and that's true. In 711 AD, Muhammad bin Qasim arrived with an army and defeated the local Brahmin ruler Raja Dahar. From then on, the city was a staging area for deeper invasions of Asia by the Islamic conquerors. A Roman egg. This, my friends, is an egg. It's an avian egg, meaning it came from a bird. It's also Roman, so the egg was hatched from a Roman bird of some sort. Maybe a chicken, maybe a dodo. Probably not a dodo, but then again, who knows? The egg is 2,000 years old and nothing short of spectacular. It's practically a mummy egg. Precisely what farm do you have to go to in order to purchase a mummy egg? You have to go to England, 50 miles northwest of London, to an archaeological dig organized by Oxford Archaeology. Researchers were digging through a pit that was used to supply water to a brewery up until 270 AD, when they made the clucking good discovery. Douglas G.D. Russell is the curator of birds' eggs and nests at the Natural History Museum. He said that the egg pulled out of the pit is the oldest unintentionally preserved avian egg he has ever seen. Yes, there are older eggs that have been preserved. A series of mummified eggs were discovered in Egypt in 1898 that are over 2,000 years old, but that was done on purpose. The Egyptians didn't just mummify their friends, they also mummified crocodiles, cats, dogs, baboons, lions, and the occasional bird egg. There were some other artifacts found strewn throughout the pit, including bits of pottery from the 3rd century. This is what helped date the egg. But what was it doing in the pit in the first place? The best guess researchers have is that eggs were left in the pit as gifts to the gods. After the pit stopped being used to supply water to the brewery, it was abandoned. There was a big empty pit. So, sort of like how you might throw a coin into a water fountain to make a wish, Romans left eggs in the pit to gain favor from their gods. It was a good luck kind of thing. A regular ritual that wouldn't be totally normal in everyday life now, but it was at the time. I should mention there were 4 eggs discovered in the pit, but 2 of them cracked when they were removed. Archaeologists said the stench emitted from the broken eggs was intense. They gave off a foul, sulfurous aroma that I can only imagine smelled awful. Out of the 2 eggs remaining, only 1 was found to contain liquid. Scientists at the University of Kent conducted a micro-CT scan, which revealed the yolk to still be inside. And there you have it, the oldest accidentally preserved egg ever found. It's cool, but does nothing of any use for anybody, though I guess it could be turned into a lethal stink bomb. Would you dare eat an egg from the days of the Roman Empire? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching!
Pumapunku. The ruins of Pumapunku are some of the most impressive ruins in the world. High in the mountains of Bolivia, Pumapunku is such a dramatic mystery that not only does it baffle modern scientists, but it also shocked the Inca when they came across it. The architectural wonders of Pumapunku are often attributed to the Inca, but the truth is that the people who built this ancient place predate the Inca by a whole lot. It was the civilization known as Tiwanaku who built the structures here 1,500 years ago. It began as a small site but quickly transformed into a fabulous religious center. The cultic hub drew in people from all over the Andes Mountains. In English, Pumapunku translates as Door of the Puma. So, some believe that the Tiwanaku were able to build doors to alternate dimensions or faraway worlds at this place. The Inca believed that Pumapunku was so magical that it must have been the very spot where the gods created the world. But you may be wondering, just what about this site is so incredible? The ancient engineering here is absolutely amazing. Scientists have no idea how Pumapunku was built with such advanced architectural techniques. Even after 1,500 years of wind and rain, the vast temple complex stands strong. The carved blocks were made with incredible precision, almost as if lasers were used to cut the stones. The handiwork is so grand that modern engineers don't even understand how they pulled it off. The Tiwanaku even figured out how to join blocks by using primitive metal staples to keep them tight. It looks as if they drilled holes with machines. and then used giant metal staples to bind the rocks together instead of using mortar. The biggest mystery is the end of Pumapunku. Suddenly, at the height of Tiwanaku's prosperity, they came crashing down. Between the years 700 and 1000 AD, about 400,000 people abandoned Pumapunku out of nowhere. But how do so many people disappear from such a glorious city in the blink of an eye? Unfortunately, it's a mystery that may never be solved. Mainstream archaeologists think there was likely social upheaval, maybe the violent kind. Others, however, suggest that the people of Tiwanaku left through stargates to join otherworldly beings. And now for number 7, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Marikad Jupisubin and Angela Hernandez for supporting this channel. Thank you so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Moai. A very mysterious artifact has been discovered on Easter Island in a volcanic crater. An entirely new Moai statue was recently revealed to the public on this breathtaking Chilean island. But what exactly is a Moai, and what did they mean to the people of Easter Island? Moai are more casually known as the Easter Island heads, though they are far more than just heads. The Moai are gigantic carved stone figures with heads and bodies, crafted hundreds of years ago from volcanic ash. Nobody has ever been able to figure out why the Easter Island civilization became obsessed with carving the massive stone figures. They almost all look identical, as if they were made from the same molds, or like they were produced using the same cookie cutter. The biggest Moai ever found is nicknamed El Gigante, and it definitely lives up to the name. The statue stands an impressive 69 feet tall and weighs nearly 200 tons. The mystery has only deepened with this newly found Moai. This one isn't particularly large, as it's only about 5 feet tall, but it was pulled out of marshland in the middle of a crater inside the Ranu Raraku volcano. What's even weirder is that the crater has been home to a laguna for the last 300 years. According to the director of the Rapa Nui National Park, the laguna was over 10 feet deep, and it was filled with marshy water. So why was there a Moai hidden underneath what was essentially a swamp in a volcanic pit? It's just another piece of the baffling mystery that is Easter Island. Magic Roman gems. In the ancient Roman port city of Claterna, recent excavations have revealed a spectacular collection of artifacts. Over 3,000 pieces of silver, gold, and bronze were recovered. Most of the pieces were coins, but 50 gems were also found during the investigation. The gems are particularly exciting because they were engraved with images of Roman deities. These were magical gems that were unearthed in a truly magical city. During the days of the Roman Empire, Claterna was a prosperous place, but now it's completely destroyed, and the whole city is buried under miles of grassy hills and trees. Archaeologists have had a difficult time trying to understand the full scope of the ruins because they're buried so deep. However, excavations have revealed roads and highways, Roman baths, and even a massive theater. It was most certainly a big and important place. So much so, in fact, that Lucia Borgonzoni from the Culture Ministry called Claterna the Pompeii of the North. Some of the coins that were discovered were minted as early as 97 BC. This suggests that Claterna was already an extremely important place during the Roman Republic. But what about the magical gems? Archaeologists believe that they were likely meant to be commemorative items, given to pilgrims visiting the city. They were engraved with Roman deities and structures that likely stood in Claterna. They wouldn't have granted anybody magical abilities. After all, there weren't any wizards in the Roman Republic, but the gems may have made whoever carried them feel like they had at least some protection from their gods. The Viking Sunstone. The Viking Sunstone is both a piece of ancient technology and an impressive relic. Icelandic texts from the Middle Ages describe how the Vikings figured out that they could use a simple stone to navigate the hostile waters of the open ocean. It was with the Sunstone that the Vikings were able to travel to faraway lands. It's how they became the first Europeans to arrive in both North America and Iceland. There was a big difference between the sailors in Spain and Greece and the sailors in Scandinavia. Spain and Greece and everywhere else in the Mediterranean are blessed with huge amounts of sun. But in Scandinavia, the skies are frequently overcast. This makes it difficult for early Norse navigators to find their way while at sea, since they couldn't see the sun or the stars to help them traverse the ocean. People in the Mediterranean didn't have that big of a problem because the sun was always out. So Scandinavians had to come up with a new technology, and that technology was the sunstone, allowing them to navigate in the harshest of weather. The sunstone is a very simple piece of rock, and that's all it is, just a hunk of stone. Vikings used naturally occurring minerals that have polarizing properties, like a colorless crystalline material called Iceland spar. Any kind of crystalline rock devoid of any color worked just fine. Even when the sky was cloudy, Vikings could hold the sunstone to the heavens and discover the exact location of the sun. Unfortunately, though, no physical example has ever been found of a sunstone used by Vikings. Scholars only know Vikings used them because they told stories about them. The dhow. In every ancient civilization, humans figured out how to build ships. But they weren't always the same. In North America, Native Americans built canoes, and so too did the Maya and the Aztec. In Europe, they built ships that could take to the oceans, opening up trade route possibilities. The Vikings used their longships to raid Russian and British coastlines, but in India and many other parts of Asia, they used something called a dhow. The dhow is an excellent example of how human beings invented similar technologies around the world, but used different methods. The dhow was made with a triangular sail, which was its most distinctive feature, but instead of its hull being nailed together with crude copper nails, the boards of the hull were sewn together with plant fibers. Basically, the dhow was a vegetarian ship, and yet it dominated the waters of the Indian Ocean all the way up until the 15th century. That was when Portuguese explorers brought their shipbuilding methods to Asia. The Greeks witnessed the boats for themselves in the 1st century AD off the coast of Zanzibar. Even Marco Polo recorded his encounter with the strange sewn ships when he entered the Persian Gulf. Marco Polo wrote that the planks were stitched together with twine and couldn't be corroded by seawater. However, the fiber-made boats were seriously susceptible to storms. Ancient hydraulics. The ancient Egyptians understood how to manipulate the natural world thousands of years ago using sophisticated hydraulic engineering. Researchers recently documented a sprawling network of stone walls along the Nile River, and when I say sprawling, I really mean sprawling. The stone walls are spread across over 600 miles of the Nile. Over a period of 3,000 years, they were built to control the river, preventing floods and controlling the body of water's flow. The walls stretch all the way from Egypt to Sudan, and they were uncovered by scientists using satellite photography. Researchers looked through aerial photographs that were taken over the decades, and at more recent satellite pictures as well. In total, they managed to document over 1,200 wall segments. They're calling the walls groinies, specifically referring to structures used in ancient hydraulics. And although most of them are ancient, some were built only a few decades ago to prevent flooding. Different segments vary in size. Researcher Matthew Dalton from the University of Western Australia said that some of the walls were built by an individual or a small group. This would have been a project that only took a few days. But other examples are huge, undoubtedly built by a large force of laborers. One of the biggest portions was found at an ancient site called Soleb in Sudan, stretching 2,300 feet and made up of over 1,680 tons of rock. Chavin de Huantar. The ancient ritual site of Chavin de Huantar is a place of magic, mysticism, and scientific understanding. Located in Peru, the first stones were laid here long before any of the famous Andean civilizations rose to power. In fact, it was already in ruins 1,700 years before the Inca existed. The temple complex was built around 900 BC. Then it was expanded around 400 years later to include an even larger structure. And by the time it was abandoned, 2,200 years ago, the temple was full of underground tunnels, galleries, maze-like structures, and subterranean chambers of darkness. While studying the baffling underground passageways, archaeologists have made some amazing revelations. But the biggest one is that the temple was designed like a massive sound amplifier. When I say sound amplifier, I mean that the temple was essentially a loudspeaker. Studies have shown that the acoustics of the temple were so potent that the building would have quivered with the voice of a god. From a central chamber deep inside, a single man's voice could have been amplified by a lot. His voice would have filled the underground corridors and burst out at the surface, as if a deity's booming words emanated from the air itself. It would have taken a lot of scientific understanding to create a building with such impressive acoustics. So, archaeologists believe that Chavin was used in extremely important mystic ceremonies. Also, the temple likely used a lot more than sound in these ceremonies. Aromas, light, noise, and hallucinogens would have all played a part in whatever happened here. People likely would have dosed themselves in mescaline, which comes from a locally grown cactus. Then, once the participants were, for lack of a better term, whacked out of their gourds, the ritual would have begun. Conch shells would have been blown deep inside the galleries to generate incredible sound. And this could have mimicked the roar of a puma or the screech of another animal. Sadly, though, there are no details on exactly what happened inside this great temple. Scientists only know how it works, not why it was created in the first place. The puckle gun. In 1718, an English lawyer developed the very first machine gun. It seems crazy to think that machine guns have been around for 300 years, but it's true. James Puckle patented and developed the puckle gun at the very beginning of the 18th century. It was an automatic weapon that fired round bullets and square bullets, but why it had two different bullets is going to blow your mind. Maybe I should stop for a second and give you a chance to guess. In the 18th century, why would a gun need to fire two differently shaped bullets? If your guess had anything to do with religion, you were 100% correct. The round bullets were designed to be fired at Christians. Square bullets, on the other hand, were designed to be fired at Turks, or any Muslim person for that matter. But why was that? It was because round bullets were more humane. Puckle was a bright enough scientist to understand that round bullets caused a quicker and cleaner death, whereas square bullets would cause more tissue damage. More tissue damage meant increased suffering and a longer, drawn-out death. So it was his conclusion that people of non-Christian descent should have significantly more painful deaths. Now let me move along to how the gun functioned. It was mounted to a tripod and was equipped with a single-bored barrel. It looked like a medieval Gatling gun. The weapon fired bullets using a multi-chambered revolving cylinder and a matchlock firing mechanism. It wasn't the very first multi-shot gun developed, but its destructive potential was higher than anything before it. Even the Gatling gun that came later copied the design of the puckle gun. The thought was that the gun could be installed on warships and be used to obliterate other vessels. This would have been devastating to a less developed civilization that didn't have any guns at all. But maybe the craziest thing about the gun was that it worked. It was a real killing machine. It didn't become mainstream though because it was too expensive and too hard to build. The British Navy took a huge interest in the weapon, as did private investors, but there were a few glaring problems that prevented it from seriously taking off. Although it worked, it was difficult to use. Soldiers would have needed to be specially trained, which was something armies didn't have time for. It was also extraordinarily heavy and too stationary. It couldn't be used on the front lines of a battle because it took too much time to set up and deploy. Gun warfare was already advancing in the 18th century, so armies knew what they wanted. And what they wanted were lightweight guns that were easy to use and quick to fire. The puckle gun, although devastating in the right situation, was too impractical to be manufactured on a large scale. It took 3 guys just to reload the weapon. So by 1722, the puckle gun was dismissed as an unusable prototype. Roman head in Mexico. Jose Garcia Peyon was excavating an ancient grave in the Tecaxic Calixtlahuaca zone of Mexico's Toluca Valley in 1933 when he made an astounding discovery. He found a terracotta head separated from the rest of its body. The head was probably left in the grave as an offering. It was found along with a number of other objects underneath 3 floors of a pyramid-like structure. Other than the head, the deceased was buried with gold treasures, pieces of rock crystal, bone, and pottery shards. Scientists were able to date the burial to somewhere between 1476 and 1510. It was only a little more than 500 years ago. On the surface, the discovery looked perfectly normal. There are lots of statues and heads that were buried with the ancient tribes of Mexico before the Spanish arrived. But this particular head caught the attention of scientists at an international level. Why? Because of its similarity to artifacts from ancient Rome. It was a Roman head buried in a tomb in Mexico. So the big question is, how did it get there? It doesn't look anything like other small statues found in pre-Columbian graves. It looks like something you would expect to find in a Roman tomb. Many trusted experts say the artifact is evidence of contact between Rome and the Americas 2,000 years ago. The theory has been promoted heavily by famous archaeologist Romeo H. Christoph. In 2001, Romeo made an assessment of the case. At the time, he was associated with the University of New Mexico. He claimed the head was the work of the Romans in the 2nd century AD. This was confirmed by Bernard Andre with the German Institute of Archaeology in Rome. Bernard said the head is without any doubt Roman. The lab analysis even confirmed it to be ancient, way older than 1500. Stylistic examination further supported the theory that the head was made in Rome. So how did it get to Mexico? That's the big question. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And now for number 9. But first, it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Katrina Johns and Optimus Princeps for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. Number 9. Kingoody Hammer. In 1844, Sir David Brewster reported to the British Association that he found an impossible object locked in a block of sandstone. The discovery was made at the Kingoody Quarry in Scotland. David found himself an iron nail corroded by years of decay. The nail was found not just lying in the stone or partially embedded, but locked inside as if the artifact had been there for millions of years. It looked as though somebody had hammered the thing into the stone on purpose. Nobody ever found out exactly which part of the quarry the nail was found, but the report was made to scientists in the middle of the 19th century. The craziest part was that according to the British Geological Survey, the sandstone bed in Kingoody Quarry dates back between 360 and 408 million years. If the iron nail truly came from almost 500 million years ago, how could that even be possible? Most experts dismissed it as a fake or said there was more to the story than what was published. The discovery has been lost to history now, and nobody even knows where the iron nail is anymore. Number 8. Egyptian airplanes. The Greeks and the Chinese weren't the only ones interested in flying. At the Cairo Museum in Egypt is an ancient model of what some think is an airplane. The model is tiny, with a wingspan of about 7 inches, and it was crafted from sycamore wood. It doesn't have any robotic abilities, but it does appear to be a mimic of an aerial vehicle. Mainstream archaeologists will tell you it's nothing but a carved bird, but not everyone is convinced. In 1969, Egyptian doctor Khalil Messiha noticed that the wooden figure reminded him of a model airplane. The model doesn't have legs, as you'd expect a wooden bird to have. It also doesn't have tail feathers like a real bird. Instead, the model appears to have a vertical rudder and an airfoil cross-section, even aerodynamically correct. The doctor's brother, who happened to be a flight engineer, reproduced his own exact copy, and he was shocked to see that it really flew through the air when launched. But where was this magnificent artifact discovered? It was dug up at the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, not far from the pyramids of Giza. It dates back to the 3rd century BC, shortly after the death of Alexander the Great. It came from a time of great ingenuity, when the Greeks were inventing screws and indoor plumbing. And it seems to be a far earlier concept of Leonardo da Vinci's own flying inventions. Whether the model is a representation of a bird or an airplane, there is really no way to say for sure. Whoever carved it has been dead for over 2,000 years. But many have speculated the model airplane was based off a flying vehicle the Egyptians witnessed, perhaps a piece of technology from an unknown race of beings who visited our planet. What do you think? Bird? Plane? Or just coincidence? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 7. Ancient alien cave paintings. The region of Tassili Najer isn't somewhere you'd want to take a vacation. It's a seemingly endless stretch of inhospitable desert in Algeria. The edges of the region stretch along the borders of Libya, Niger, and Mali, and the total area covers roughly 28,000 square miles of the smoldering hot Sahara Desert. But even in such a brutally unforgiving place, There are secrets. Hidden in caves and drawn in the crevices of crumbling rocks are paintings left behind by ancient people. The first paintings and petroglyphs were found in 1910, and it's been since the 1930s that archaeologists have been scouring the area for new pictures. What makes them so special and so out of place is that many of the pictures depict ancient aliens. The site is unlike any other in the world. The volume of pictures itself is a mystery. There are thousands and thousands of them, but the fact that the rock engravings feature weird beings that look like they came from a faraway planet is what really has scientists interested. In 1956, French explorer Henri Lotze visited Tassili Najer, and over the next 16 months, he and his team identified over 800 paintings. Henri would go on to publish a book about his findings. He was particularly fascinated with the humanoid drawings, who he believed were alien beings. More than that, he described them as Martian gods. The theory was that the people of the desert worshipped Martians, and they drew pictures of them on the rock. The Martian pictures can even be found alongside ordinary drawings of creatures like elephants and giraffes. Number 6. The Newark Holy Stones. In 1860, a man named David Wyrick discovered a set of artifacts inside a cluster of Native American burial mounds. The mounds are located near Newark, Ohio. David found a keystone, a bowl, and a decalogue inside a sandstone box. A decalogue is a copy of the Ten Commandments. The burial mounds were likely created by the Hopewell culture, who existed in this part of America between 100 BC and about 500 AD. And yet the artifacts are very obviously European. But how did European artifacts end up buried in a Native American grave? The artifacts, now known as the Newark Holy Stones, are extremely controversial. One group particularly interested in the artifacts is the Mormons. In their scripture, the Book of Mormon, it says the lost tribes of Israel traveled across the ocean and integrated with the Native Americans hundreds of years ago. The Newark Holy Stones are real artifacts that seem to support that theory. They suggest Europeans made it to America 1,000 years ago, long before Christopher Columbus. That means it's entirely possible the lost tribes of Israel also made it to America on boats. And ever since the artifacts were featured on the History 2 channel in 2013, they have been gaining steady popularity, but archaeologists aren't convinced. Mainstream professionals say the artifacts were forged. They likely came from the 1860s, a group of forgeries from a time when slavery was still a hot debate. The artifacts may have been planted in the burial mound as a way to defend the European or white claim to the land, and therefore their right to own other human beings. Number 5. The artifacts of the Chachapoya. In the remote cloud forests of northern Peru, near the heart of the Amazon River, the cloud warriors of the Chachapoya reigned supreme. They were the masters of the forest long before the Inca Empire ever established itself. They were a group of shamanistic warlords, though they'd eventually be beaten down by the Inca. They were also defeated with help from the Spanish, forced to abandon their lands. Then they disappeared into obscurity. The fortress city of the Chachapoya has stood empty for hundreds of years. It's called Cuelap and stands nearly 10,000 feet above the Utcubamba Valley. It's a megalithic place, sheltered by the clouds themselves. Its walls were 60 feet tall, with much of its architecture just as advanced as that of the Inca. They were a highly sophisticated group of people, and they were mysterious as well. When the Spanish laid their eyes on the Chachapoya, they were shocked. Spanish conquistadors wrote of how the cloud warriors had pale white skin like Scandinavians. They looked nothing like the Inca, suggesting they'd come to South America from a faraway land, likely thousands of years ago. German professor Dr. Hans Gifhorn studied the city in 1998. He was shocked by the ruins he witnessed there and by the out-of-place artifacts he found. Many of the relics left behind by the Chachapoya were unique and extremely different from artifacts of the Inca. The professor compared the culture of the Chachapoya to the Old World culture of the Celts. His theory was that people migrated from Europe to South America, likely from Ireland, and they became the legendary Cloud Warriors. Do you believe the Chachapoya were of Irish descent? Or do you think this was just another example of trying to make anyone with light skin be from Europe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 4. The Lanzhou Stone. Researchers Dilin Wang discovered the Lanzhou Stone in a mountainous region of China in the 1990s. The stone is remarkable because it appears to be a meteorite, made from a material scientists were never able to identify. The stone also contains inside of it a small metallic artifact that looks like a piece of machinery. A report from the Lanzhou Morning News in 2002 claimed nearly a dozen geologists and physicists gathered to study the origin of the mysterious stone. That includes researchers from the Lanzhou College and the Institute of Geology and Minerals Research of China Academy. Pretty impressive, right? After a lengthy discussion, scientists supposedly labeled the stone as extremely valuable. This was mostly due to the piece of metal inside of it, with marks clearly showing artificial fabrication. Unfortunately, nobody really knows much about the stone. There are very few sources, which makes what little information is available hard to believe. The stone's current location is unknown, and today there is no mainstream scientist talking about it. Many believe the scientists who discovered it realized how it could change human history and dispose of the evidence. Or it could just be a concretion. Number 3. The Glozell Artifact. In 1924, archaeologists investigated a cavern filled to the brim with artifacts. It was first brought to the attention of researchers by a farmer who uncovered the cavern while plowing his field in Glozell, France. And once archaeologists began to do their investigation, they were blown away. The cavern contained over 3,000 artifacts, removed over the course of 6 investigative seasons. But it wasn't long before the artifacts became controversial. Experts started to doubt their authenticity, and even now, most mainstream archaeologists believe the Glozell artifacts are fake. The artifacts are controversial because they date back to around 10,200 BC. They aren't all that exciting, meaning the artifacts weren't made using any kind of advanced technology. The relics are simple pieces of pottery and stoneware, and yet they date back 12,000 years to a time before any known human culture created pottery. Even scientists in the 1920s thought the idea of such an ancient culture forming clay into pieces of art was insane. But as crazy as it seems, the artifacts are most likely real. Their discovery wasn't part of any hoax. They were found by 17-year-old Émile Fredon as he plowed a field on his family farm. His cow's foot got stuck in the ground, which revealed the underground chamber filled with human bones and pieces of ceramic. It was hardly an elaborate hoax. But the big question still remains a century later. Who was so advanced in France 12,000 years ago that they were building vases in an underground pottery workshop? Who do you think made this ancient pottery? Let me know down below. Number 2. Dighton Rock. Dighton Rock has been an object of great mystery in New England for centuries. Nobody knows much about it other than at some point before 1680, it turned up in what is now Berkeley, Massachusetts. A person or people of unknown origin left a 40-ton boulder in the middle of nowhere scrawled with enigmatic images. The first mention of the rock was from Harvard graduate John Danforth in the 17th century. He visited Dighton and drew his own picture of the drawings on the stone. That picture is currently stored in the collection at the British Museum. Even all these years later, scientists are no closer to understanding the carvings on the stone. Some suggest the drawings were made by Native Americans. That would make the most sense. However, the petroglyphs are just a little off. They don't look too much like other Native American petroglyphs in the region. Ezra Stiles in the 18th century suggested the stone is the work of Phoenicians who traveled to North America thousands of years ago. Danish historian Carl Christian Raffen was convinced in the 19th century that Dighton Rock was made by the Vikings. Then, in the 20th century, Professor Edmund de la Barre from Brown University suggested the carvings were made by Portuguese travelers 400 years ago. Now, in the 21st century, archaeologists still can't agree on who put the rock in Berkeley or what story the images carved on it are trying to tell. Number 1. The Quimbaya Artifact. In Bogotá's Museo del Oro, or the Gold Museum in English, there are some artifacts on display that need an explanation. The artifacts were found in Colombia's central Cauca Valley at some point in the late 1800s. Unfortunately, it's unclear exactly where they came from because they were looted, not excavated by archaeologists. Experts think they probably came from a pair of tombs, but it isn't entirely known. The only reason they're in the museum at all is because someone turned them over to Colombian authorities years ago, wanting to get them on display for everyone to see. There are over 100 small gold figurines in the collection. They date anywhere from 300 to 1000 AD. Each one is between 2 and 3 inches in length. All are made of solid gold, and all of them look an awful lot like flying machines. Mainstream archaeologists say the gold figurines represent mammals, birds, bats, fish, and flying insects. But others have noticed how the figurines look an awful lot like airplanes. They have obvious aerodynamic features, and some appear to have fuselages and stabilizers. Could these artifacts be proof that the lost Quimbaya civilization witnessed real flying machines? These people flourished over 1,300 years ago in Colombia, and no one has ever found evidence that they learned how to build machines. But what if they witnessed others using flying technology, like visitors from another world, for example? Lost Mesopotamia. There is a new artificial intelligence capable of identifying ancient Mesopotamian sites with an 80% accuracy rate. Researchers used 5,000 sites to train their model in what to look for while scrubbing through satellite photos. The program very quickly learned how to spot particular shapes and patterns that could be never-before-seen ruins. But as of right now, the program hasn't done anything particularly special. It hasn't discovered any lost cities or interesting archaeological zones. I'm sure it's just a matter of time. But Mesopotamia already has a long history of secrets being revealed through satellites. Anthropologist Dr. Jesse Casanas studied old spy satellite photos taken of Syria to uncover the truth of Tel Brak near the Tigris River. Tel Brak is one of the largest ancient cities in Mesopotamia and among the oldest in the world. It was originally photographed from the air in the 1920s, then excavated in 1937. It was considered an international city in its heyday. People from Babylon, Sumer, and Akkad all lived together within its walls. Around 2000 BC, it was abandoned for unknown reasons and gradually became a ruin. When Dr. Kasana started looking through spy satellite images from 50 years ago, he noticed that Tel Brak's ruins might be older than archaeologists originally thought. He suspected that instead of the city being settled around 4000 BC, it was founded around 6500 BC. He also thinks Tel Brak might be the first city in the world, and it was all thanks to studying the old satellite images. However, he still needs to find artifacts to confirm his suspicions, and that's proved to be a lot more difficult than he hoped. Number 9. The Sharkano Eruption. NASA recently took satellite images of a submarine volcano in the Pacific Ocean. It's called Cavachi, or more casually, the Sharkano. The underwater volcano is famous for being the home of multiple shark species. Amazingly, sharks live inside the volcano, even though it's such an extreme environment. According to NASA, their operational Land Imager 2 captured the new photographs of the volcano as it erupted. The images show the murky blue waters of the Southwest Pacific, and rising from the volcano, a cloud of green, super hot, acidic water. Cavachi is named after the sea god of the Vangunu people who lived on Vangunu Island east of Papua New Guinea. It is one of the most volatile underwater volcanoes in the world. It started erupting in 1939 and has barely taken a breath to stop. It may have been erupting even earlier, but nobody noticed because it was underwater. The summit of the volcano is about 65 feet beneath the surface. It has created several islands from its eruptions, but they always end up getting washed away by the sea. It was nicknamed Sharkano in 2015 when researchers witnessed sharks and fish living in its crater, inside its active crater, where at any moment, superheated magma can hit the water and create steamy explosions. Silky sharks and scalloped hammerhead sharks live inside the hot water. Scientists called Cavachi a natural laboratory, and one full of mystery. For NASA to capture images of its eruptions from space is seriously next level. And now for number 8, But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Samla8078 and Tony Vanova9360 for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Number 8. The Tombs of the Nomads. The ancient Scythians appeared in Central Asia around 900 BC. They were a group of nomadic warriors who specialized in horses and archery. They expanded their territory from China to the Black Sea, traversing vast stretches of uninhabited land. However, due to their nomadic lifestyle, they did not settle permanently in one place. As they followed the seasons and the availability of food, they left behind pieces of themselves all over the place. There are thousands of tombs spread across Central Asia, Siberia, and along the edges of the Black Sea. The tombs were very simple. A deep grave pit was dug, then the body was inserted. The pit was filled with soil and piled with stones. Most of the burial mounds have been pillaged over the years, and the artifacts stolen from them. Gold, jewels, weapons, and horse gear, all taken out of Scythian burials. But not all the tombs have been found, mostly because the area is so vast, and finding them is so hard. Technology is changing that. Archaeologist Gino Caspari from the University of Sydney has been using satellite images in northwestern China. He and his colleagues mapped about 68 square miles of disturbed burial mounds. They were able to see which mounds had already been pillaged and which ones might still contain treasure. This is a huge deal because it will make life for archaeologists easier. They can now start to search for burial pits more likely to contain mummies and gold. The study revealed that about 3/4 of the burial mounds in northern Xinjiang have already been looted. That does indeed suck for researchers, but a quarter left intact is still good news. Besides, most of the tombs being looted is not a huge surprise. When Russia began to colonize Siberia in the 1700s, tomb raiding was big business. It was a seasonal industry, with hundreds of workers hunting for lost Scythian tombs. It was like the Klondike Gold Rush in North America, resulting in a massive loss of cultural history. Number 7. Elephants, Satellites, and AI. For the first time in human history, animals have been successfully counted and photographed from space while moving across a complex landscape. African elephants, naturally being so big, proved to be an excellent first. From 372 miles above the surface of the planet, WorldView 3 and WorldView 4 satellites counted the number of elephants in South Africa's Addo Elephant National Park. The counting was done by artificial intelligence, and the whole operation was very impressive. Until recently, the only way to know how many animals are in a certain place has been to use airplanes. A group of conservationists will fly a plane low over a national park and count the elephants themselves. It's a tedious job that takes many hours and can make mistakes. But satellites have now gotten so good, and mixed with deep computer learning, they can survey 2,000 square miles in minutes. This most recent project proved that AI is as accurate as the human eye, for spotting elephants anyway. Isla Duporge from the University of Oxford said the proof of concept is so good that conservation organizations are already hoping to replace their aircraft surveys with it. This is only the beginning. As the technology advances and becomes more available, counting animals will become easier. Presumably, satellites will be able to count how many animals are in a certain country within a matter of seconds. That's still years away, but it's completely plausible. If Bigfoot really is out there, satellites and AI will be how we definitively prove it, or disprove it. What else do you think aerial AI technology will discover? Number 6. The Lost Vikings. Satellite technology has identified what could be an ancient Viking site in North America. There is already one Norse site in Canada, Lansdowne Meadows. It was built on the island of Newfoundland in the 11th century AD. Proving Vikings beat Christopher Columbus to the Americas by 500 years. But now satellites have identified another one. It's located on the southwest coast of Newfoundland, not too far from Lansdowne Meadows. If true, it could mean Vikings began settling across much of the island. They may have inhabited it for centuries, living alongside Native Americans. They may have also built a second city and then died out. Researchers just don't know what happened to the Canadian Vikings. The discovery was made from 400 miles above the surface of the Earth. Infrared images were taken of Newfoundland. Space archaeologist Sarah Parcak from the University of Alabama was looking for discolored soil and anomalies in the vegetation. Did you know there was such a thing as space archaeology? I didn't. These are typical hints of something hiding underneath the surface. These scans discovered artificial shapes that suggested ironwork. The landscape was changed in such a way that would have been done using iron tools. Native Americans in Canada did not have the knowledge of how to process iron ore. This was one of their biggest disadvantages when the Europeans arrived. They didn't have iron yet. These scans show that some cultural activity was happening at this site, and those who were there likely had iron tools. It's approximately 300 miles south of Lansdowne Meadows. The Vikings may have sailed around the island and established settlements at what they thought were important places. Nobody really knows. It's important to know when this was made because it makes a big difference in interpretation. These satellite images were taken by Sarah Parcak in 2014. The potential Viking settlement was named Point Rosé, but it's been almost 10 years and no new evidence has come out. The site still hasn't been confirmed as a legitimate Viking settlement. Excavations in 2015 revealed bog iron ore, which was thought at the time to be evidence of Norse activity. But then, in 2016, it was discredited as a natural process. The site is still a major mystery, but Sarah Parcak may have given up. She hasn't applied for an archaeological permit since 2016. What do you think? Should she keep looking? Let me know in the comments. Number 5. Aliens harvesting sun energy. UFO hunters recently analyzed images taken from NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory satellite and made some wild accusations. By UFO hunters, I mean self-proclaimed ufologists. They claim to have found in the satellite images a gigantic, unidentified flying object near the sun. The object, according to UFO hunter Scott Waring, is feeding off the energy of our beloved star. Scott says that when looking through the photographs, he noticed the UFO appears and disappears several times a week, but it always seems to come back, and it looks very much like a spacecraft. It looks like it has wings. Scott said the potential UFO reminded him of a giant angelic being. In reality, what were the UFO hunters seeing in the images? The alleged UFO does look like an alien ship. You can't deny that it looks like a vessel sailing near the sun, but it also kind of looks like a glowing paper sailboat. If not for the intense size of the thing, it could easily be dismissed as a trick of the light. NASA engineer James Ober said most UFO sightings are little more than space dandruff in front of the cameras. The huge UFO, said to be harvesting particles from the sun, could just be a piece of fluff that fell in front of the camera. Then again, why would it come back over and over again? What do you think about this one? Is the alien ship nothing but a piece of chipped paint? Or are aliens really harvesting energy from the sun to take back home with them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Number 4. Persian nukes. Something spooky is going on in the Persian desert. Satellite images recently revealed what appears to be an accumulation of nuclear weapons at Iran's Fordo nuclear facility. Not the buildup of nuclear weapons themselves. That hasn't been seen in satellite images. Instead, the satellite pictures showed air defenses being moved to the nuclear site, presumably to protect it from attack. 2 uranium enrichment sites received additional defenses. These are 2 of the key nuclear facilities in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard deployed a Power 737 missile system and SAM air defense missiles at both remote desert outposts. Does this mean Iran is preparing to plunge the world into a third global war? That is wild speculation, and nobody can say yes or no. But the new defenses did happen to be moved to these sites in the final weeks of Donald Trump as president. It's been a couple years now, and Iran hasn't launched any nuclear weapons. But it's scary to know that these sites are so heavily guarded and presumably ready for action. Number 3. Secrets of the Bermuda Triangle. 150 miles off the coast of Florida, NASA's Terra Modis satellite took photographs over an area of the ocean called the Bermuda Triangle. Perhaps you've heard of it. The satellite was not targeting the Bermuda Triangle for any paranormal reasons. It was focusing on coastal clouds. But the meteorologists studying the photographs noticed something unusual. They spotted a series of clouds shaped like hexagons. The hexagonal clouds range in size from 20 to 55 miles wide. Meteorologist Randy Cervini from Arizona State University explained that the hexagonal clouds are something called air bombs. They form from microbursts of air. Blasts of air move from the bottom of the clouds, ricochet off the ocean, and then form air waves. These air waves can be so strong that if they hit a boat the right way, they could capsize it. The air bombs could even bring down an aircraft. When the air hits the water, it's so strong it can generate a wave of over 45 feet high. It could be that air bombs are responsible for the many ships and planes that have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle. Number 2. Band of holes. In Peru, there are about 6,000 human-sized holes spread throughout the Nazca Plateau, known as the Band of Holes. They took the international community by storm in 1933, when Robert Shippey published an aerial photograph of them in National Geographic. Archaeologists visited the site in the 1970s, and in 2015, archaeologists from the University of California used a drone aircraft to create a detailed map of the site. The best way to look at it is from above. Despite the many years of research, Band of Holes is still a mystery. Some people call it Smallpox Hill. Locals don't know who made the holes or what they were used for. Some suggest they were graves. Others say they may have been used as storage pits during the Inca Empire in the 15th century. But nobody really knows, and no amount of satellite images or drones has changed that. Number 1. Harold Bluetooth's burial. Scientists believe they may have discovered the lost tomb of King Harold Bluetooth, but it's not a sure thing. Harold Bluetooth became the ruler of Denmark and Norway after the death of Old King Gorm around 935. Archaeologists have a very good grasp of Harold's life, but then the final decade of his existence suddenly becomes obscure. There are no written accounts of where he was buried. Researchers say they have used satellites to identify a mound outside the small Polish village of Wiekowo. They think the mound was built in the 10th century as a burial plot for Harold. The mound does exist. It's visible in satellite images. But for some reason, nobody's gone to excavate. The images became international news in 2022, but there has yet to be a major excavation. The burial mound is right there next to the church. Why is nobody digging it up looking for the dead king's body? And not to mention all his treasure, too. Did you know that Bluetooth technology is named after Harold Bluetooth? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon. Bye!